welcome. I don't know how my internet connection is doing because it was doing poorly yesterday. And somehow or other, when it rains a lot, we have this problem. So let's see what happens. And we're going to discuss, amongst other things, the Lord's Lila and how Yogamaya enacts the Lila, and even how enacts the Lila in a way that bewilders even the devotees, so that it can expand the Lila to something very special. So we're going to read some one or two Lilas from Chaitanya Bhagavat. I think you'll like. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. We'll do kirtan. And yes, welcome. Kirtaniya Sada Hari. Kirtaniya Sada Hari. Kirtaniya Sada Hari. Govinda, 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 Govinda. Radhama Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Shodhanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Shodhanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Vijana Vallabha Girivardhari Vijana Vallabha Girivardhari Shodhanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Shodhanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So today we're going to deepen our understanding of Yogamaya, which has already gone pretty deep, but it can go deeper, and we will go deeper. Are you ready to go deeper? And the beauty of Krishna consciousness is you'll never hit the bottom. So don't worry that it'll get boring. It'll always get better. As long as you get better, it will get better. Hare Krishna to all of you. Welcome. And I'm going to begin reading from where we left off. I don't know if we have anyone who's going to put the quotes up, but this is on page 47. I think, Christe, you may put it up. And it begins, my own experience is this. I believe this is a commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Or Bhaktivinoda Thakur, maybe. Jaiva Dharma. Or Brihat Bhagavatam, I'm not sure. Brihat Bhagavatam Rita, Sanatana Goswami. So we'll begin reading. This is the top of page 47. Unfortunately, we don't know who this is, but it could be Sanatana Goswami from Brihat Bhagavatam Rita, which is a story of the Bhagavatam. My own experience is this. When Krishna lived in Braj, so many calamities threatened to destroy it. Braj was disturbed by demons from Putana to Keshi, by demigods like Varuna and Indra, by creatures like the python, and by the falling of familiar things at Krishna's house, like the cart and the Arjuna trees. But to these dangers, the residents paid no regard. So this is in relation to a discussion of Yogamaya. Let's read before this. The last thing we read was how Yogamaya expanded the Rasa Lila into a day of Brahma, which seemed like only a few moments for the gopis. And so here we are reading about the effects of Yogamaya on the residents of Vrindavan, that even though there's so many dangers, they have Krishna's shelter. So, I mean, imagine Krishna were living in your town and there were dangers. You also wouldn't be worried. But by the influence of Yogamaya, no one was worried. So here's the commentary. The residents of Braja were simply happy to have Krishna in their midst. They did not care what dangers befell them due to Kamsa seeing Krishna as an enemy to be destroyed. To kill Krishna and ruin Krishna's homeland, Kamsa sent many demons. Those mentioned in this verse and others like Kaliya, the serpent who on Kamsa's order polluted the Jamuna with deadly poison. Besides the friends of Kamsa, Krishna had yet other adversaries, including powerful rulers of heaven. Nonetheless, the Brajbasis constantly thought only how to keep Krishna happy. They never considered protecting themselves from the attacks of the demigods or demons. So they weren't fearful. And they were so absorbed in Krishna, and Krishna is more dear to them than their own selves. So that's why they weren't really concerned about themselves. Sometimes mothers have this experience of love for their child greater than love for themselves. So if there's danger, they're concerned with their child. They're not concerned with themselves. I need some tissues. Give me a second. I'm going to explore my office. Otherwise, I'm going to be scratching my nose during class, like every 10 seconds. Well, there aren't any, so excuse me if I scratch my nose a little more than usual. Okay, so now let's read the next verse. It continues the same theme. As if entranced in each event, they wanted only to assure Krishna's welfare. They never thought about themselves. Commentary. It was Krishna who entranced the residents of Vrindavan. Acting through his Yogamaya potency, he diverted them from paying attention to their own safety. At the same time, he completely protected them. That's a nice arrangement, isn't it? You don't think about your own safety because you're thinking about Krishna, and Krishna protects you. Vaishnavas are supposed to cultivate the understanding that Krishna will protect them from all dangers. Raksishyati Vishvashaha. I think we may have read this. The Brajbasis, however, manifested the perfection of this surrender spontaneously, without having to practice it, in other words, because they were Krishna conscious. If you're Krishna conscious, you don't have to read in a book how to be Krishna conscious. That's what's being said here. So that's why hearing about the activities of the pure devotees is so powerful, because you get to see the practices of bhakti, which are no longer practices for them, but they're natural, spontaneous. So they had this deep and unbounded faith that Krishna would protect them. That was like, how do we say it? Taken for granted. That was just taken for granted. And so they knew if there was any danger, there was nothing to worry about, because Krishna would protect them. And that is being said here is that was the influence of Yogamaya. And because of that, they never thought about their own protection, and therefore they were undisturbed in their meditation on Krishna. Another thing you can understand is that if you're very attracted to someone, if you're very attached to someone, it's very easy to think of that person. It's difficult not to think of that person, whatever we're most attracted to, whatever we're most attached to. We tend to think of it all the time. If we lose it, we tend to think of it constantly. So if we put ourselves in the position of the Brajbasis, being in that position uninfluenced by anything other than Yogamaya, there's no impediment like we have. So many impediments. We have this physical body, we have the mind, we have the senses, we have our conditioning, we have our desires. We have so many impediments to meditating on Krishna, and we have our attachments to things other than Krishna. So imagine you didn't have any of those impediments, and your only attachment was to Krishna. And then you get some glimpse, not really understand the Brajbasis. It's more of a textbook understanding, but we get some glimpse of the position of Brajbasis. Well, they don't have material bodies, so they're not worried about their body. And they're completely attached to Krishna. So that's all they can think about. So they couldn't really possibly be concerned about their safety. In that condition, it wouldn't happen. That's the idea. So, imagine for a moment that within your body, there was only one desire to serve Krishna. Within your senses, there was only one desire to serve Krishna. There was nothing else. Then you start to understand at least a little bit about the position of the liberated pure devotees. Because we're so used to obstacles, being in this world, which is the kingdom of Maya, and we have to get out of Maya to get into Yogamaya. In that kingdom, there is only Yogamaya, so they don't have to get out of Maya to stay in Yogamaya. It's not a struggle. There is no opposition to their meditation. There is no opposition to their desire. And in this world, there's so much opposition from our own mind, from our own senses. It's crazy. And there is no other desire. There is no other opposition. It's only Krishna. And as I said, when you're attracted to something, that's all you think about. If you're intensely attached to something, that's all you think about. So then that explains their position. Krishna's there, that's all we think about. We don't think about maintenance. We know Krishna will take care of us. And as it's said here, this is all the action of Yogamaya. So then this continues. We're reading from Brihat Bhagavatamrita. So this was Sanatana Goswami. When we began the first verse or commentary, that was Sanatana Goswami. So here's the next verse. And oh, the most glorious thing, and oh, there's a verse in Bhagavatam, beginning first canto. The verse says, oh, the king. And Hari Griva was editing it. He said, Srila Prabhupada, is oh his name? Oh, the king? Or is it, oh, the king? I never thought oh was his name, but anyway, he had to make sure. And oh, the most glorious thing is that the foremost of enlightened persons, the Lord himself, while drowning in an ocean of love for his dear devotees, cannot always remember what he has done and what he's going to do. Now that appears to be a contradiction, since Krishna says in the 7th chapter, Vedaham samatitani vartamanani charjuna bhavishani chabutani. I remember everything. Vedaham samati. Equally, I remember everything. Vedaham samati. Vartamanani charjuna. Past. Bhavisha. Future. I remember it all. And now, it says here, Krishna can't even remember what he just did a minute ago. What's going on here? What's going on here is for the Lila, he doesn't want to remember. It helps the Lila to forget. Sometimes, not always. But sometimes it helps the Lila to forget. So he forgets. That works, right? So when there's ever a contradiction in the Lila, like Krishna's running from his mother, and you might be thinking, but he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He couldn't actually be afraid of his mother. And his mother has a stick, but she's not really going to do anything, and he knows everything, and he knows that, and in fact, he's enacted this Lila. That would be like going to a movie, and while you're watching the movie, you're thinking, well, I know there's a camera right there, and it's on a track, and it's moving like that, and I know these two actors actually hate one another, even though they're in this love scene. And I know the producer's right over there, and the director's right over there, and they're telling them what to do. Like, you wouldn't go to a movie like that. That would like ruin it all. So there is a place for that, especially if you're a filmmaker, to look at it that way. So there may be a place philosophically to understand the Lila. But to relish the Lila, then we just accept Krishna is afraid of his mother and he's running. Or Krishna has forgotten something. because that's actually what's happening. By the influence of Yogamaya, he actually forgot. Although it was his desire to forget, so she arranged that he would forget. But now within the Lila, if you approach the Lila from that tattva, then how will you relish the Lila? Oh, Krishna's not actually afraid. It's just Yogamaya is coming. And okay, we should understand these things. But when we're actually relishing the Lila, then that would get in the way of relishing the Lila, right? So the residents of Braj are covered by Yogamaya, so they're not philosophically analyzing, oh, Yogamaya is covering us, actually. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, actually he's not afraid of his mother, and so forth. No, he's afraid. He's crying. He's shivering. He sees Mother Yasoda. He is shocked, really. So Yogamaya creates that situation, and then in that situation, we relish that pastime and the affection that Krishna has for his mother and the affection his mother has for him increases. And as you study and understand Krishna Lila, that is the foundation of it, increasing this rasa, increasing this taste and relish. So that's what Yogamaya does. So if she creates a situation which is a paradox, in a sense it's not a paradox because it's supporting the highest aspect of Krishna consciousness, which is rasa, love, mellow, relish between Krishna and his devotees. So let's read the commentary. Isn't perfect knowledge an automatic byproduct of love of... I can't speak anymore. Isn't perfect knowledge an automatic byproduct of love of God? Why then are the pure devotees of Goloka so forgetful? Good day, sunshine. It was cloudy when I went into my office. Now the sun has decided to say hello. Why then are the pure devotees of Goloka so forgetful? Okay, let's read that again because we got interrupted by the sunshine. Isn't perfect knowledge an automatic byproduct of love of God? Why then are the pure devotees of Goloka so forgetful? Yes, to one who has prema, omniscience comes naturally. But prema, being all-powerful, can redefine what is knowledge and what is ignorance. The personality of Godhead himself, by the influence of his Yogamaya, also forgets what he did before. But though he often forgets, he sometimes remembers, if it serves the purpose of his pastimes. So that's clear, I think, right? Now, that's all that I got from Brihad Bhagavatamrita about Yogamaya. And now we're going to Chaitanya Bhagavat. And Chaitanya Bhagavat was written by Vrindavan Das Thakur about the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. And when Krishnadas Kaviraj wrote the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, he mentioned early on that he wasn't going to repeat, or at least not detail, pastimes which were already explained by Vrindavan Das Thakur. So if the pastimes are there in Chaitanya Charitamrita, they're more briefly explained. Or they're not there at all, and you'll find them in Chaitanya Bhagavat, and many of you have not read Chaitanya Bhagavat. So in doing my research on Yogamaya, we got some quotes from Chaitanya Bhagavat, and a story as well, which is very interesting. And how should we describe this story? I was going to say cute. Endearing is the word. An endearing story about Lord Chaitanya Nimai when he was young. So we're coming in the middle of the story, but this is the story. You may remember the story. One Brahmin stopped at the house of Lord Chaitanya's father, Jagannath Mishra, and asked if he could cook. The tradition was that Brahmins would only eat what they cooked because they wanted food only cooked by pure Brahmins. And The only way to know if the Brahman is pure is be a pure Brahman and cook yourself. So that's what they did. So Lord Chaitanya was in his room. It was at night, and the Brahmin had cooked and then was making his offering, and Lord Chaitanya came out and ate the offering while the Brahmin was making the offering. And the Brahmin was quite frustrated, And Jagannath Mishra was quite embarrassed. This went on several times. It said, Nimai, don't do this. Yes, yes, yes. Finally, they locked him in his room because it kept happening. And he came out of his room and ate it. But then he revealed to this Brahmin, he said, you keep calling me to eat, so I come and eat, and I'm getting chastised for it. And he showed him that he was actually Gopal. Yeah, I believe this Brahmin had a Gopal deity or a Gopal Shila, and he showed him, well, I'm that same Gopal. And that Brahmin went nuts, basically. He went transcendentally nuts, crazy, in a good way. I think he was taking, I can't remember, I haven't read the story in a long time, but I think he was taking prasadam, and it was just like he went crazy. He was throwing it all over his body. You could imagine. Well, we say you could imagine. I don't know if we could imagine, but we could understand that if some little kid was, harassing you, and all of a sudden, a few hours later, he manifests himself as Gopal, you'd probably go crazy in a good way. So this is where we begin reading from this Lila where he revealed himself. In this way, after mercifully pacifying the Brahmana, Lord Gauracandra returned to his room. So they had locked him in a room in the house, and he came out somehow. The Lord then returned to sleep as a child, and by the influence of Yogamaya, no one awoke. So you remember the story of Vasudeva when he had to take Krishna from Mathura to Vrindavan, and how by the arrangement of Yogamaya, all of a sudden, jail cell opened, the chains off his body, all the guards. Nobody could wake up any guard. And they stayed asleep the whole time, and then he came back, and the jail cell locked, the chains back on his feet, and then the guards wake up, and like nothing happened. So something similar is happening here. This whole Lila is going on in Lord Chaitanya's house, and the Brahman is going into ecstasy, smearing prasadam on his body, and this and that. And by the influence of Yogamaya, nobody in the house had any idea what was going on. They didn't hear anything. They didn't see anything. They were just sleeping. So you can see how Yogamaya is like, I call Yogamaya the producer of Krishna's Lila because whatever is needed, she makes sure it happens. So here's the commentary. At that time, the people of the house and village were sleeping in the soothing lap of Yogamaya. So not only the house, the village. That means the neighbors couldn't hear the Brahmin screaming either. Gauranga! Something like that. Or Gopal. By the Lord's will, they did not awaken from their sleep and disturb the Lord's pastimes. So it was just, in other words, this Lila was just between Krishna and this Brahmin, or Mahaprabhu and this Brahmin. And so that's the way he wanted to keep it. Yogamaya understood that. Yogamaya kept everyone asleep. So Yogamaya knows what Krishna wants and then organizes the pastimes accordingly. So everything is happening perfectly by Krishna's desire through the agency of Yogamaya. And as you know, and as it's been discussed in Prabhupada's books, and we've discussed, when Krishna wants something, he just has to will it, and he has all his energies will telepathically engage according to what he wants. So Yogamaya is demonstrating this to us, so we understand how it works. Just by his will, it's all communicated. She knows what to do. So we're going to read a very, the word is endearing story. We're going to read a very endearing story right now. So it'll take a few minutes to read it, but you're gonna love it. You're going to be a little shocked, also, but you're going to love it. So this is how the story begins. Although the Lord's house, this is when Nimai was a young boy. Although the Lord's house displayed all symptoms of poverty, he would make demands like the King of Kings. Commentary. The word Daridratara Prakash refer to the condition of poverty of an ordinary living entity. Wherever Sri Gauracandra was full with 6 opulences, is present, that place is devoid of poverty and want. The phrase Yena Maha Maheshwarera Vilasha Ishvarera refers to the independent will of Sri Narayan, who is full in 6 opulences. Like Krishna was raised in a poor home. Mahaprabhu lived and his parents were not wealthy. Interesting. He, meaning Lord Chaitanya, never considered whether there was anything at home or not. If he didn't get what he demanded, there would be no escape from his wrath. Basically, he would have a tantrum. He would even break the door of the house without considering that it was his loss. Still, out of affection, Saci would try to immediately give him whatever he demanded. One day, as the Lord prepared to go and take his bath in the Ganges, he asked his mother for oil and amalaki. He said, "I want to worship the Ganges after taking bath." He said, "So please give me a garland and some sandalwood paste." His mother replied, "Please listen, my dear child. I will go bring a garland. Just wait a minute." As soon as he heard the words, "I will go bring," the son of Saci became as angry as Lord Rudra. "You will now go get a garland?" Saying this, the Lord angrily entered the house. In an angry mood, the Lord first of all broke pots of Ganges water. Then he took a stick and broke the containers of oil, ghee, and salt to pieces. The Supreme Independent Lord then broke the small and big clay pots that were used for auspicious ceremonies. Oil, ghee, milk, rice, cotton, paddy, salt, body, and mung dal were strewn throughout the entire house. In an angry mood, the Lord tore down and smashed all the hanging pots. He tore apart the cloth and everything else he found in the house. After breaking everything, he directed his anger on the house. Holding a stick in his 2 hands, he began striking the house. No one dared restrain him. Then, after smashing the doors and house, he began hitting a tree with his stick. Still, his anger did not subside, and he began striking the earth. Mother Saci fearfully hid in a corner of the house. The Lord is the personification of religious principles. He advented to establish Sanatana Dharma, so he never tried to hit his mother. Although the Lord was filled with anger, he would not hit his mother. After breaking everything he could, the Lord finally began to roll in the courtyard out of anger. As the golden limbs of the Lord became covered with sand, he appeared indescribably beautiful. After rolling on the ground for some time, Gaura calmed down as he continued lying there. In this way, the Lord of Vaikuntha entered into Yoga Nidra as he lay there on the ground. Commentary. The word Yoga Nidra indicates that the Lord slept with the help of Yogamaya, which is his independent spiritual nourisher of his transcendental pastimes that we read previously. Yoga Nidra is Yogamaya. Nidra means sleep. So Yoga Nidra is Maya, Yogamaya performing a specific function in this case. Now the Lord's laying down in Yoga Nidra, which is what Mahavishnu does. He who lies on the body of Ananta, he whose lotus feet are constantly served by the goddess of fortune, he who is to be known through the Vedas, that same Lord was now sleeping in the courtyard of Saci. Stay tuned, there's more. He whose hair pores are the source of innumerable universes, he whose servants direct the creation, maintenance, and destruction of those universes, he whose glories intoxicate the minds of even Shiva and Brahma. That same Lord was now sleeping in the courtyard of Saci. As the Supreme Lord thus relished Yoga Nidra, all the demigods either cried or laughed. Shortly thereafter, Saci Devi brought a garland and other ingredients for worshipping the Ganges. She slowly brushed the sand off the Lord's body and lifted him up. Get up, my dear son. Open your eyes and take this garland. Go worship the Ganges as you desire. It is good that you have broken everything. I hope that all future impediments have been destroyed by this act. In other words, sometimes you break something, and the reason you break it before a ceremony or a function is that so if you break something now, that nothing will be broken in the future. So Saci was not angry. He said, well, it's good you've broken everything. That kind of protects us from any future impediments. There'll be no impediments in our life because we did this. It's kind of like a ceremony. On hearing his mother's words, Sri Gauracandra felt embarrassed and went to take bath. Meanwhile, Mother Saci cleaned the house and prepared to cook. Although the Lord destroyed so many things, Saci did not feel any distress. She simply tolerated Gaura's mischief, just as Mother Yasoda tolerated Krishna's unlimited mischief in Gokula. In this way, Saci, the mother of the universe, constantly tolerated all of Gauranga's mischievous activities. I am unable to describe the many other similar mischievous pastimes performed by the Lord. That means there's too many. That means they're always happening constantly. Mother Saci tolerated them all with her body, mind, and speech as though she was the mother, as though she was Mother Earth herself. The phrase Jena Pativi Apane indicates that Saci became as tolerant as Mother Earth. Earth is very tolerant because she tolerates so much, just tolerates the sinful activities of so many people. After some time, Nimai, the supreme enjoyer of various pastimes, returned home after taking bath in the Ganges. The Lord then worshipped Vishnu, offered water to Tulsi, and sat down for his meal. Fully satisfied after his meal, the Lord washed his hands and then chewed some betel nut. Don't chew betel nut, it's intoxicating. Thereafter, Mother Saci softly asked him, my dear son, I have a question for you. Why did you destroy so many things? The house and its doors belongs to you. So destroying them is your loss. It's really not my concern. So I'm just wondering, why did you do that? You say that you will go to school now, but there's nothing left at home. What are you going to eat tomorrow? The Lord smiled and said, Krishna is the maintainer of everyone. He will maintain us. And now enacts a Lila that happened many times. Saying this, the Lord, who is the husband of the goddess of learning, took his books and went off to school. He's the husband of the goddess of learning. He's the source of all knowledge, and he's going to school. That's pretty funny. Isn't it? Krishna's amazing. After happily enjoying his studies, the Lord went to the Ganges in the evening. He passed some time on the banks of the Ganges and then returned to his home. The Lord then called his mother to a secluded place and gave her 20 grams of gold. That's even probably worth a decent amount today, what to speak of them, right? 20 grams. How many grams in a pound? In an ounce? Dear Mother, see what Krishna has given. Please get it exchanged for our necessities. Thereafter the Lord went to bed, while the astonished Saci Devi considered. Where does he get this gold so often? I'm afraid there may be some problem, like she was thinking, maybe he's stealing it. Whenever there's a shortage of necessities at home, he brings gold. So that ends that Lila. Nice, huh? Krishna really likes to joke around as a kid, doesn't he? Okay, so let's have some discussion here. Let's see what you have to say. Rashmi says, where can you find my kirtans? YouTube. What's that one with iTunes? What's the other one? Spotify. I'm not sure if they're on SoundCloud. Go to, there must be a YouTube channel for my music, right? I don't know anything. Mahatma's music, that's one. We're kind of transferring Mahatma's music to, we put everything on iTunes. Yeah, sometimes I read things over, especially on Monday, because the last time we read was Friday. That gives you 2 days to forget. So I'm going down to see if we have a comment. Yeah, Krishna Karshani has a comment. You said that pure devotees first think about Krishna and don't think about themselves. I know devotees who are not yet pure devotees. I know some too. And they patronize KC, neglecting their own needs, which I take on their stage of Krishna consciousness artificial. Should beginners they neglect their needs and patronize service, having faith Krishna will fulfill his or her needs. To make story short, should a devotee fulfill his desires and needs on his own, or leave it to Krishna? If you have a spiritual body, you don't have to worry about it, because you don't have any material needs. So, it brings up a point, Anusara Anukara, which Prabhupada describes, I believe, in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And so you have to make a distinction when you hear of the pastimes or see the activities of pure devotees, then you have to make a distinction whether I can do that or I can get the idea of it and then apply that idea to myself. Well, like Srila Prabhupada would sleep very little in the evening and get up and translate. And many devotees have tried to do that, but it didn't really work for them because they would become unhealthy or very tired, or they couldn't function well during the day. So if I can't imitate it, then what do I take from it? And I take, well, utilize your time as best you can. You know, if you're having trouble getting something done, see if you can rise earlier. Do it early in the morning. See if in some way you can make time. So that would be following in the footstep. Rather than an imitation would be you try to do something, but ultimately it doesn't help you. It might help you for a while. You actually get some things done, and then you get sick. Or you become, your mind's not functioning well. You're accomplishing a lot of things for a few hours early in the morning, but the rest of the day not. So that's how you know you're imitating. It's either eventually having a opposite effect than the desired effect, or you can't maintain it. So then you take the idea. Okay, the idea is to minimize sleeping, and then apply that as best you can to your particular situation. Now, the question comes, should I make an effort to maintain myself, or should I just depend on Krishna? And I'll explain this in relation to a similar question that was asked to Prabhupada. A devotee was ill and asked Srila Prabhupada, should I go to a doctor or should I just depend on Krishna? And Prabhupada said both. He said ultimately it's Krishna, but it doesn't mean that we don't take practical action to deal with the situation. He said, so you go to the doctor and pray to Krishna. So, you know that saying, act like everything depends on you, pray like everything depends on God. So it's something like that. Prabhupada didn't want us to be impractical, but he didn't want us to be so practical that we're impractically spiritual. Like, he didn't want us to be so practical that we don't depend on Krishna enough. So it's a balance. We make efforts and we depend on Krishna. In some cases you can't do much. So you can only depend on Krishna. You can only pray. Other cases, there's much you can do to improve a situation. You know, I wouldn't want to mess something up and have to tell Prabhupada, well, it wasn't successful because I was just praying for it to be successful, but I wasn't doing anything. And I don't think any of us would want to be in a position to explain to Prabhupada that something failed because we didn't do anything, we just prayed. You know, he would think we were crazy. But if you're on a very elevated platform, Avadut platform, and Krishna is fulfilling all your desires, whatever you think, Krishna fulfills it, then it may be a different story. But still, Prabhupada did not exhibit that idea of we will just sit and pray and everything will happen. But at the same time, he did pray. But he prayed and endeavored. So that's the lesson. Pray and endeavor. Do both. Synergistically. And everything will be good. 28 grams is an ounce. Wow. So almost had an ounce of gold. Okay. So how much is an ounce of gold worth today? And then, can someone do some calculation? How much an ounce of gold was worth 500 years ago? Can someone just Google that and then put that in the chat? It would be interesting to see how much he came up with. What's an ounce of gold worth today? And what's an ounce of gold worth? What's a little less than an ounce that he gave her, but we'll get an idea. What's an ounce, specifically 500 years ago, what was an ounce of gold worth? That would be interesting, wouldn't it? To see how much he gave her. The poor family, you know. Did he give her like $50,000 worth of gold? Something outrageous. Could be, right? Yeah, so Satyarupa says we have to practice tolerance so we can tolerate Krishna's mischief when we go back to Godhead. Yeah. Yeah, because he might steal yogurt from your house. Well, you have to tolerate it when you go to Braj in your eternal Lila in Braj. because he might come to your house and urinate on your floor and steal your yogurt. Which, you remember that story? The gopis would complain to Mother Yasoda about Krishna doing that, but actually they liked it. Because if Krishna's, if the only way you can get Krishna to your house is to have him steal your yogurt or create some mischief, then you like that because you like Krishna and you like everything he does. So they would complain to Mother Yasoda, but they actually liked that he was coming and doing it. So yeah, you'll be able to tolerate the mischief, don't worry. And you'll relish it. And if you can't tolerate it, then you can take position of like a kutila, jatila, like similar position so you can chastise Krishna. So, an ounce of gold today is worth, oh my God, 1,816. Okay, so now, Kaylee, can you find out? I could only imagine what it was worth 500 years ago. Even by today's standard in India, if you make that much money in a month, you live a good life in India. So it sounds like we can imagine that Mahaprabhu gave her like a lot of money. Yeah, who can guess? 100,000, worth $100,000? That would be my guess. Then turn that into rupees or whatever currency they use. Yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of wealth that was given to his mother, like poor family, and all of a sudden, like, okay, we're flush. We're living high on the hog. Yeah. Oh, Krishna, when do I get my ounce of gold in today's currency? Okay, so now we're going to read. I'm waiting. Kelly's trying to figure this out, searching on Google. For any of you, we can have a race competition. Whoever finds out first, let us know. So this is from Chaitanya Bhagavat, another story. We're getting some stories here. Some Lila, that's nice. And the sun. Isn't there a song like that? Sunshine through my window? Oh, you guys are too young for these things. And you're all like, oh, I have to listen to all the songs from the 60s so I know what Mahatma Prabhu is talking about. Okay. In Britain, 1,546 an ounce of gold was worth, 15, was worth 302 pounds. Well, how much was 302? Was worth 3.02 pounds. Well, how much was that worth in today's currency? Tanya, we have to translate 302 pounds 5 years ago was in today's currency. I really want to know. This will be the highlight of the class today. Okay, so here's the Lila. By seeing that Gauracandra was as learned as Brihaspati and as beautiful as Cupid, ordinary people thought that such a transcendental beauty and extraordinary knowledge would remain only for the duration of his life. That is, they were temporary. But the opulences of Krishna are actually eternal. In other words, when Lord Chaitanya was young, he wasn't manifesting himself as anything other than a young boy. He wasn't manifesting that he's a devotee. Wasn't manifesting that he was Vishnu, but he was really beautiful. So everybody thought, well, he's an ordinary person, so he's beautiful, he's a young boy. Beauty's temporary, the body will get old, One day he'll leave his body, and he was a vastly learned young boy, and that'll all be lost. They didn't understand that Krishna's beauty is eternal and his opulences are eternal. They thought that if the opulences seen in Gauracandra were those of a devotee rather than those of an absolute independent form of Krishna, who enjoys pastimes out of his own sweet will, it would particularly increase the happiness of the devotees. They didn't know he was a devotee. Let's read that again. Yeah. So he has this knowledge and beauty, and so the devotees were thinking, well, if he were a devotee, then that would bring happiness to the devotees. Because they always just, they'd say, Nima, you know so much. You're so great. You're so this or that. If you were a devotee, it would all be perfect. And Lord Chaitanya would say, yeah, in the future, not now, or maybe in the future. By the desire of the Lord, the Vaishnavas also did not understand at that time that Lord Gaurhari is directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sri Krishna is an ocean of transcendental pastimes. By his own will, the influence of Yogamaya neither manifest Gaura's covered pastimes, nor gave an opportunity to the Vaishnavas to understand his Gaura form was that of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Though they saw him, they nevertheless did not see or understand his real form as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ordinary conditioned souls had no right at all to perceive the Lord who was engaged in his covered pastime. So, okay, for conditioned souls, only 824 pounds today. That doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. That's all. No. 824 pounds today, but what about then? Too complicated to figure out, right? Someone's going to figure it out. 302 pounds is worth, 1,500 pounds today, or 2,000 US dollars. Okay, I was wrong. Mother Saci only got $2,000 in their currency, which is which is a good wage for a day's work, and plenty to keep them going. Worth 100 days of labor. Okay. So it was like 3.5 months, 3+ months of salary. Here. This is what okay. So let's say, yeah. All right. So that's worth 10 or 15,000, because in America with salary, a month's salary like 4,000, 3, 4, 5, 6,000. If you work in Silicon Valley, it's 10,000. So anyway, that was a good day's work, right? It's enough to keep them going for a while. Okay. So what's being said in this Lila is that by the will of Krishna, by the will of Mahaprabhu, nobody understood who he was, which we know for non-devotees they won't understand. They're not qualified to understand. But here it's described. By the will of Lord Chaitanya, the devotees didn't understand, because they would always say, oh, Nimai, you're so beautiful, you're so smart, you become a devotee. It would be amazing. It would be the perfection of everything. So they didn't really know who he was. They just thought he was some amazing young boy. That was done by the influence of Yogamaya. At that point, he didn't want them to know. And that was all for the Lila. So that's interesting, right? And we read this before in Krishna Lila. So many of the devotees did not understand Krishna, who he was, even outside of Vrindavan. They didn't fully understand him. That's the way Krishna wanted it. So this is all, as we've discussed many times, this is all to increase this rasa. No, you're not going to know who I am. Things are going to get really sweet. So this next one, I don't know where it's from, actually. Why don't I know where it's from? Let's see. Well, we're still in Chaitanya Bhagavat. Okay, so it's from Chaitanya Bhagavat. It's not, these are random verses which discuss Yogamaya, so it's not sequential in any story. Here's the next quote. The word yoga nidra is explained as follows. The science of self-realization is called yoga. As through self-realization for the devotees, external feelings are vanquished, or for the Lord, his manifested pastimes in this world remain unmanifested. This has been compared with sleep. Yogamaya is yoga nidra because she steals the symptoms of consciousness from everyone, just as sleep does. So we've been, I just put this in because we were reading about Lord Chaitanya falling asleep and the guards falling asleep and so forth. So Yogamaya is yoga nidra because she steals the symptoms of consciousness from everyone. So then Yogamaya becomes Maya. And either she puts them to sleep for the Lila or puts them to sleep for their Lila in the material world. Yoga nidra is the predominating deity of the Lord's energy. That was a commentary by Vira Raghava Acharya. So we continue reading Chaitanya Bhagavat. Unlimited universes are bewildered by Maya, the shadow of Lakshmi, Saraswati, and other internal potencies. Like, it's interesting how Krishna says, Daivi Yeshu Gunamayi, Mama Maya Duratyaya. And there are unlimited entities, even in the human form, in the material world, and they're all bewildered by Maya. And very few, as Krishna says, Manushanam Sahasreshu, very few get out of it. And so Maya's doing an excellent job. You would think it'd be hard to illusion everyone, like you could illusion some people. But Maya's so good, practically everyone in the universe is illusioned by her, and they're still here. They can't get out of the illusion. So here it says, unlimited universes are bewildered by Maya. It's true. You figure somebody in those universes would figure it out. But the problem is, even if you figure it out, it doesn't mean you can get out. So the fact that we can actually get out is so rare and so amazing. You should never, never, never forget this, how fortunate you are to be given that little tunnel out of this material world, to see your way out of here by the mercy of Prabhupada. Otherwise, nobody can get out. And as I often say, if they could have gotten out, they would have gotten out by now. But nobody can get out unless you meet a pure devotee. And that's the proof. You're still here. They're still here. We're all still here. People want to try to get out on their own. And my question to them is, well, how's that working for you? You've been here for unlimited numbers of lifetimes, and you're still here, and your body's getting old, and that's not fun. And someday you're going to die, and that's not fun. And you'll come back and go in the womb, and that's not fun. So I don't think it's working out too well, trying to do this on your own. And you've had millions of chances. And you ever try to do something and you just can't figure it out, and at a certain point you know someone in the house knows how to do it, or you have a friend that knows how to do it, so you ask, can you help me with this? Can you come over? I can't do this. That's just smart. But to stay in the material world and try to get out and never get out and not look for help, not smart. So let's read the purport. Yogamaya removes the covered and thrown conditions born from the conditioned soul's enjoying propensity and assists the conditioned souls in achieving the unalloyed service of Krishna. Great job, Yogamaya. Let's give you a big hand, please. Can you help me? What do we need help with? Remove the covered and thrown conditions. Remember, this is the two conditions of Maya. She covers you and throws you. So she takes those conditions away and then assists us in achieving pure devotional service. And this is nice. Now think about this. The way this is being described here is exactly the opposite of the way you would describe Maya. So I'm going to turn this sentence around, right? We're going to go from Yogamaya, removes the covered and thrown conditions born from the conditioned souls, enjoying propensity. I'm going to spin it around and say, Maya covers a living entity and throws them in conditioned life because they want to enjoy. So the exact opposite. And because they want to avoid the Lord's service. So, whatever Yogamaya does, flip it around, and that's what Maya does. Or whatever Maya does, flip it around, and that's what Yogamaya does. And when this same Yogamaya is accepted as the object of enjoyment by persons who are averse to the Lord, she immediately bewilders, punishes, and sends them to the prison house, the material world. So I jumped the gun. It's already being said here. So you have this energy, Yogamaya. And for the devotees, she helps them serve Krishna. For the non-devotees, she helps them enjoy. Only because that's what they want. Hey, Yogamaya, could you help me enjoy the material world? And then she shows up as Maya. Okay. Maya, could you go? And I just want to serve Krishna. And then Maya shows up as Yogamaya. Correct? So be careful who you call. Be careful who you invite over to your house, because there are consequences. She immediately, what are the consequences? She immediately bewilders, punishes, and sends them to the prison house, this material world. The conditioned souls in the material sky, which is their field of enjoyment, are eligible for being covered by ignorance due to their propensity for temporary enjoyment. I like that way that's explained. It's a interesting kind of English. It's almost sarcastic, but I don't know if it was intended to be that way. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the material world. You're now eligible for the many benefits that come with being a conditioned soul. And here they are. You are eligible for being covered by ignorance. Congratulations. Fully qualified to be covered by ignorance. Since the principles of ignorance, abomination, and interruption are absent in the eternal abode of the spiritual sky, even though Yogamaya has the propensity for favorable service to the Lord, due to the enjoying spirit of the conditioned souls who are averse to the Lord, she bewilders them by creating illusions that are unfavorable for the service of the Lord. Why would she do such a horrible thing like that to all these poor conditioned souls? And the answer is simple. Because they want it. That's it. Don't blame Maya for your problems. You call her up and she comes and creates trouble for you. It's not her fault you called her up. It's your fault you called her up. Maya and her opulences, who are like shadows of the Lord's spiritual energies, such as Lakshmi and Saraswati, spread a network of nescience, which is converse to spiritual knowledge. In other words, opposite. By awarding mundane knowledge to the averse conditioned souls who are wandering throughout the universe. As you know, there are many interesting things to learn in this material world. Sometimes you'll see, if you're online, some advertisement for some interesting documentary or interesting course about life on other planets or aliens or the structure of the brain or past life regression or lost civilization, and on and on and on and on and on, isn't it? And you can do a PhD on so many interesting subjects, and PhDs tend to be very focused on an aspect of a subject. And if you're interested in a subject, then you start studying, you find that there's vast amounts of information on many, many topics, things that we as laymen wouldn't necessarily be interested or think that anyone would be interested in. But there are many people interested in it, and they do lots of research. I was reading a book, Life of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, or aspects of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's life, and there were references in this book to life in Bengal in the 1800s and different social movements going on and political movements and so on and so forth. And so many people had written about it and related subjects, spiritual, social, socio-political, and so forth. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, this is so interesting that there's so many books on the topic, which I think wouldn't have imagined it would be of any interest to anybody. And I don't really know if today it is of any interest to anybody, but it's a history. I'm sure interest to some Bengalis, history of the Bengali culture and evolution of Bengali culture and religion. So I don't know if you've ever thought like this, but sometimes I happen across people who are very knowledgeable about something, about things like the difference between male and female brains, for example. A lot of people study that. Or just studying the human brain and how it reacts, or studying the brain of an addicted person, study the brain of a happy person or a depressed person. Or, you know what I'm saying, it's just getting very into studying very interesting things. And I sense, especially those who are very knowledgeable in the areas, who understand it deeply, I sense they probably studied it in their last life or many lives. And that's why they're so good at it. And that's why they're in the forefront of the research on it. And that's just one way that Maya keeps the conditioned soul in the material world, by finding something that interests them in this world and allowing them or causing them to get very absorbed in that, so much so that their whole life evolves around it. Take a Beethoven or a Mozart or a Michelangelo or a Shakespeare, and you could imagine the absorption they had in their art and their craft. Especially when you're that good, you have the potential to create amazing art, amazing drama, amazing literature. And you get so absorbed in it. And what happens? You just come back again, being absorbed in it, and continue being absorbed in it. Someone like Shakespeare, I think he like failed his English class or something. So he thought, yeah, forget this. We'll just make up words. I'll create my own English. What the heck? So he was that good. Obviously, he had practice in other lifetimes. So this is one of the ways Maya works on us. She gets us very absorbed in something that we really, really like. And we can't stop doing, and we're always thinking about it and studying it and learning more. And then we go, life after life like that, and we never get out. So the material world is interesting. There's no doubt. There's a lot of interesting things here. But the problem is, if you get too interested in them, how are you going to get interested in Krishna? And how will you have time for Krishna? Because you're spending all your time with your other interests. And so that's one of the ways Maya does it. Okay. Maya, the external energy and her opulences, who are the shadows of Mahalakshmi, the internal potency of the Lord in the spiritual sky, and who bewilder the averse conditioned souls, are also bewildered on seeing the Lord's supreme opulences as they constantly engage in the service of the Lord, while considering themselves the fully dependent maidservants of the Lord. So the point is, everyone's bewildered. Devotees, non-devotees, just bewildered. Devotees are bewildered in a way that they become attached to Krishna. And those who are not devotees are bewildered in a way that they go further away from Krishna. Everyone's bewildered by Krishna. In the mood of maidservants, they serve the Lord for his ultimate satisfaction. And To create further illusion for the living entities who are adverse to the Lord, she is seen from the material point of view as Maya, the bestower of the fruits of work. So Yogamaya becomes Maya. It's like, what do you want? You want this side of me or you want that side of me? It is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 174 through 6, quote, he saw the absolute personality of Godhead along with his external energy, which was under full control. Due to this external energy, the living entity, although transcendental to the three modes of material nature, thinks of himself as a material product and thus undergoes the reactions of material miseries. The material miseries of the living entity, which are superfluous to him, can be directly mitigated by the linking process of devotional service. Okay. Now I'm going to go back and see what you have to say, if you have anything to say. So, Vrindavan Lila says, aka Pandora Hinson, I have a lot of good fortune in life, even though I am a useless devotee. On the other hand, I have seen the very advanced devotees having so many hardships and tragedies in life. It doesn't make any sense to me. Well, I was just reading something. I think we're going to read something that answers this question. Or we read it last week. That I don't know if you were here in class, Vrindavan Lila, we had read, and Prabhupada said, when you see a devotee suffering, and he went down the list, like Prahlad Maharaj, Ambarish Maharaj, Haridas Thakur, and then he even mentioned Jesus Christ. He said, this is all happening by the will of the Lord for a purpose. And sometimes there are reactions that a spiritual master has to take and suffer. Sometimes we have to suffer simply because we're engaging in devotional service and there are people who don't like it and they will react against us and make our lives difficult. But Prabhupada said this is all ultimately happening under the divine arrangement of Krishna, and the devotee actually doesn't suffer. He's still blissful. And the devotee takes it as, well, if this is what Krishna wants, then this is what Krishna wants. And the devotee will use that to advance in his Krishna consciousness. There are statements more or less where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and Srila Prabhupada are both saying that your path, what Bhaktisiddhanta said, when you become Krishna conscious, your path will be strewn with thorns. There'll be so many difficulties, both internal difficulties and external difficulties. Oh yeah, Prabhupada said, well, one devotee was upset because she was being criticized. Prabhupada said, don't expect a calm sea in the material world. There is no calm sea. So, every few days you get some news of something horrible that has happened, either in ISKCON or outside of ISKCON, isn't it? So, it's a reminder of where we live. And the suffering of a devotee is ultimately it's under Krishna's control. Now, having said that, that's a philosophical point. But sometimes we may do things which have caused reactions. Doing something, let's say we do something foolish. We do something we shouldn't have done. I'm an advanced devotee, but maybe I inadvertently offended or consciously offended someone. So yeah, I will suffer for that. Or I made some offense to the deities. I'm an advanced devotee, but I made some offense to the deities. There will be some suffering. So things like that happen also in devotional service. I upset another devotee. there may be some suffering. So it's not all divinely ordained. It may be a reaction to something we've done, or we inadvertently do something wrong, we get a reaction. So, yeah. Now it's time for a joke. I've heard a joke, I think it was from Hridayananda Maharaj, that he says PhD stands for permanent head damage. He also once said it stands, I don't know if he said that, but he said piled high and deep. Of course, he said that before he got his PhD, so you'll have to ask him again if he's recovering from head damage. Piled high and deep, and I like piled high and deep because you're very piled high and deep and a very, pinpointed study. Although there are many things which devotees can study, which would be very beneficial for our movement, for sure. There are many, many things that if you ever want to do a PhD, or many things you can study which could be utilized in the service of the Vaishnavas. So that's good. That's different. Krishna Karshani says, so it means if we are going too well in life, it means we're not properly practicing Krishna consciousness. Yeah, if everything's great, you're so unfortunate. You must be doing something wrong. Not necessarily. It's up to Krishna what he wants to do and how he wants to deal with us and what he thinks is best for us and what we can handle and what we need. But in one sense, Krishna Karshana, you could say for a devotee, everything's always going well. Like people always ask me, how's it going? And I always say, it's going the way it always goes, because the external around me doesn't have like a whole lot of influence on me. So when they say how it's going, the question is, how's it going around you? And I always answer with the answer is how it's going inside of me, because I don't pay much attention to what's going on outside of me. I mean, I don't avoid it, but I don't put a lot of energy into thinking like that. So even if externally it's not so great for a devotee, it doesn't mean that the devotee is experiencing it that way. It's like, for a devotee, there's not a whole lot of difference between things going really well materially and not so well, because he's not trying to enjoy materially. So if things are going well materially, he's not relishing that. It's just, there's less inconvenience. It means nice facility for serving Krishna. Everything's going well. I have everything I need. There's no big obstacle. So that's nice for service. If things aren't going so well, it just means I have to overcome some obstacles in Krishna's service. I have to deal with it. But that's part of my seva, so I do it. So it's not so much affected. But one thing I think is really important is that if everything was always easy for everyone, where would we have any examples of tolerance or patience or forgiveness or kindness to people who are unkind to you and so forth? So when a devotee undergoes some difficulty, then we are fortunate enough to see the example of great tolerance or patience or great forgiveness or great humility. I was just listening to this lecture. This snippet has been going around the internet. And it's on the disappearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. And Prabhupada is describing his life. And he said, my spiritual master came twice in a dream. At that time I was a grihasta. I was married. I had a business. My spiritual master came twice in a dream telling me to take sannyas. I was horrified. I'd have to give up my family. Gradually, my business, it was failing. Now I understand that was Krishna's mercy. By his grace, everything is happening. It's not due to me. He was going on and on like that. And then he said, this movement is successful. He said, but I have to thank you more because you're actually doing it. I don't feel very qualified. You're actually doing it. And he said, I have to thank you more because you're helping me fulfill the mission of my spiritual master. And then Prabhupada started crying. And then you could feel from this lecture that the mission of his spiritual master was his life and soul. And that anyone who was helping Prabhupada fulfill that mission he was obliged, indebted to, and extremely grateful. But aside from all that, when I was listening to this lecture, I was getting this intense, I don't know how to say this, this sounds so simplistic. But I was feeling Prabhupada's humility, that he was talking about his life. I was a grihasta, I had a business. It wasn't like, trying to hide that. I'm this big guru, let's forget about what I was before. He's basically saying I was attached grihasta and my guru was telling me to give up sannyas. And I thought, this is horrible. How can I do this? He's saying that totally vulnerable. And then he's saying, but you were all the ones who did this, not me. And I was listening to this and I was thinking, oh my Govinda, what intense humility Prabhupada's showing. And I think sometimes we don't pick up on it because we're so awed by Prabhupada's position. Sometimes we don't pick up on this intense humility. And I was listening. As I was listening, I was feeling it. It was a total emotional experience. It wasn't an intellectual. I was feeling Prabhupada's humility. I could feel it like this. He's coming from a position of I am nothing, and you are all helping me. And I was an attached householder, and it's amazing this has happened. I was thinking, oh my God, this is humility. The person who's the first person to spread Krishna consciousness around the world is thanking his ex-hippie disciples for doing it. So, I think those examples are so important for us. So if a devotee undergoes some difficulty, but he's extremely tolerant, and he's always jolly, and he's not complaining, what fantastic example is that for us? And so we understand that sometimes Krishna will put his devotee through some difficulty. So we have that example. And I'm sure you have, or you will have, and many of us have had this experience, that we may be going through something that's not easy for us, but we think of another devotee who has gone through this and has handled it well. And that becomes our strength for going through it. And that devotee may be a peer. It may be a historical personality you read about in Bhagavatam. It may be Srila Prabhupada. It may be your spiritual master, your husband, your wife, somebody. And when you're going through a situation which is difficult, and you think of that devotee who's gone through similar difficulties or just has gone through difficulties in general, but not fallen to the degree that you may be falling to, not falling to this level of I can't do this, I'm discouraged, I can't go on, complaining, etc. And you think of them, it gives you tremendous strength. So that's why I think that sometimes Krishna creates situations like this, because we need them. We need these examples. Otherwise, the examples, if they're just theory in a book, your mind will say, well, yeah, it's theory, but nobody can do that. That's naturally where the mind goes, because if you don't have experience yourself and you've never seen anybody do it, then you read in the book and you say, this is like pie in the sky. Nobody can do this. And I think that's what happened in Christianity. Many of the teachings of Christianity, teachers of Christianity, say that what Jesus taught was for him to follow, not for us, which absolutely makes no sense. But you can make sense out of it, and that so many people failed to follow it, so they assumed that it wasn't for them. But if you have so many Christians who are following it, you would never say that, right? So we need those examples. In one side, we want to be pure devotees, but other side afraid to be pure devotees, because pure devotee must be tested and put by Maya or Krishna to many problems, like Haridas Thakur or Christ, Prahlad Maharaj. How to overcome? Well, because by being tested and passing those tests, you get Krishna's mercy. That's how. And you inspire other people, and you go back to God in this lifetime. So whatever difficulties we're going through in this lifetime are I don't think are as great as the difficulties of taking birth again, do you? and being in the womb of 9 months. And Krishna always protects you. See, the thing is, Parananda, we're supposed to understand that everything is for Krishna's enjoyment. So whatever will give Krishna pleasure, I do that. And I don't consider it'll be good or bad. I just do it. That's what it means. So when a devotee thinks that way, he's not worried about whether he suffers or not. It's just, this is what Krishna wants, I do it. If you're worried about, see, the thing is, if you're worried about suffering, think about this. And this, Krishna Karshani, will answer your question. That, what's going on outside bothers me. If I think about my own happiness and pain, I actually suffer more than if I suffer, but I'm only thinking about, so-called suffer, but I'm only thinking about Krishna's pleasure. So I'm doing this for Krishna's pleasure. So even though I'm suffering, so-called, I'm not really experiencing suffering. It doesn't bother me because I'm thinking this is for Krishna's pleasure. But if I'm thinking I don't want to undergo the suffering because I will suffer, then it means I'm thinking about my pain and I'm thinking about avoiding pain and my pleasure. And so if I'm thinking about my pleasure and how to avoid pain, I'm actually suffering more than the devotee who's not thinking about his pain and pleasure, who's just willing to do whatever will satisfy Krishna, even though it may be difficult. Does that make sense? If it didn't make sense, I'll explain it again. Just let me know. Where can we find this class? By Srila Prabhupada. I tell you, you can find it here. But where it is here, I'm not sure. If I find it on my phone, it's in my WhatsApp, I will send it to my Facebook page. I'm just trying to think who sent it. I have no idea. I listened to it yesterday. Let me see. I might have it. Yeah, I have it. You want to hear it, right? Class is over. I'll put it on Facebook. Okay? How does that sound? We'll send it out on Facebook. Or is that it? Is that the lecture? Tanya put it up. I think this is the one. I'm not sure. I'd have to click on it. I'm clicking on it and let you know if it's the one. Of course, if it's not, we can listen to both.
So in this way,
yeah,
gradually,
that's it.
I became attached to.
Okay, so thank you, Tanya. This is correct. And so what I would suggest to all of you is listen to that lecture and meditate. Listen to that lecture from the perspective of Prabhupada's position, but how he's fully manifesting humility, and allow yourself to feel it, that humility. And if you can allow yourself to connect with Prabhupada's humility on an emotional level, it will be very purifying, and it will hit your false ego and kind of explode it. Not kind of, it will explode it to one degree or another. That's my point. When you have these examples of pure devotees, then it affects you. And it purifies you in a way that perhaps chanting every day for 50 years couldn't bring this level of humility that you could get if you listen to this class in that mood. So that's what I would suggest. Hare Krishna. To all of you, we're going to say goodbye. And always remember that suffering for Krishna is more enjoyable than enjoying in Maya. I should write that down, shouldn't I? We can talk about. I've probably spoken about that before, but that's kind of one of the things we're concluding here. Suffering for Krishna is more enjoyable than enjoying Maya. And when you understand that, then A lot of those, when you understand that, then the fears of surrender, or the fear that if I become more advanced, then Krishna will put me into difficulty, this and that. No, that's a material calculation. It's a material understanding. And if we have material calculations and understandings of bhakti, then we can't surrender, because we think surrender will be difficult, or we think surrender will be intolerable or painful, etc. And then Maya comes in and says, yeah, you should surrender to me. It's going to be real easy, and it's going to be real enjoyable, which is exactly the opposite of what's true. Not surrendering to Krishna is not easy and enjoyable. In the moment, it may appear that way, but that's Maya's illusion. But then you get another body, which is not easy or enjoyable. And if you surrender to Krishna, he will help you deal with everything, and you'll be blissful eternally, which is much easier than being in Maya eternally. But Maya's job is just look at Krishna consciousness from a material perspective, and then you make material calculations. If I do this, I won't be happy, this will be hard, and so on. But in fact, Maya's got you in this miserable condition, but she's making, it's like these women get dragged into prostitution, and the pimps say, I love you, I'll take care of you. But their life is miserable. But they're thinking, at least I'm being taken care of. So it's like Maya's making us, like pimping us. Well, you have me, and you don't have to worry, I'll give you sense gratification. But we have a miserable life. And the young girl prostitute is now afraid to go on her own, because she doesn't know. She doesn't have faith she can live. So we don't have faith we'll be happy with Krishna. So we let Maya be our pimp, basically. Right? That's the problem. So you can't look at Krishna consciousness from a material perspective, from a perspective through the vision of sense enjoyment, how I'll be happy, from the perspective of, fear, what if I do this? I might suffer, or how I'll be happy. Can't look at it that way. Because if you do, then you can't really properly serve Krishna. You can't serve Krishna in the best way you possibly could, because you're looking at something in an unrealistic way. And then therefore you're responding, all your reactions are not really based on knowledge. They're based on fear. And why would you want to base your life on fear? You want to base your life on truth. You want to base your life on what Prabhupada is teaching. And Prabhupada's not teaching that you're going to be unhappy if you surrender. He's teaching you're going to be unhappy if you don't. And we flip it around because we see it materially and think, no, but if I surrender too much, I'll be unhappy. And if I don't surrender so much, then I'll be happy because I'll have enough. All right, there's some truth to that. You have to have enough materially. But we all have experience that even great austerity in Krishna consciousness brings great pleasure. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that, the greatest trials become my greatest pleasure. So that's the idea. Hare Krishna. So nice being with all of you. I hope that helps. Very important points. And we will see you on Japa if you want to come. And anytime after 10, which is 16 minutes from now, and I'll be there in 1 hour and 16 minutes. And we'll have a few words of inspiration. Hare Krishna.